You know, history can sometimes feel like just a bunch of dates and facts, but to really get a moment, to feel it, you need a story from someone who was actually there. Today, we're going to experience the passing of Mahatma Gandhi, Bapu, as he was so lovingly called, through the eyes of Nayan Tara Sehgal. This isn't just history. This is her personal story of a nation's overwhelming grief.
So picture this. It's the evening of January 30th, 1948. The narrator is just at home when an urgent, frantic phone call comes in, and these are the words she hears, words that absolutely shatter the calm of an ordinary day. She later wrote that she was just numb with shock. It was the moment a nation was suddenly plunged into darkness.
So what was it like right in those first few moments? Well, we're at Birla House. Gandhiji's relatives and followers are gathered around his body. The source describes this incredibly heavy, profound silence in the room as he breathes his last. This was the quiet, still center of a storm that was just about to break over the entire country.
And what a powerful image that is, right? A flame fanned by wind. It wasn't just news spreading, it was a fire. It really captures the sheer speed and the white-hot intensity with which this tragedy just consumed Delhi. Almost immediately, you had these sad groups of men and women gathering, just instinctively, all around Birla House.
Can you imagine that? Looking out and seeing not just a crowd, but a brown blur of faces. It speaks to the enormous number of people. But here's the thing that really gets you. There was no noise. The author calls it an unnatural silence, a quiet so deep it felt like time itself had just stopped. The whole city was holding its breath.
And this right here, they looked like lost children. This just perfectly captures the feeling behind that silence. That initial shock started to fade, and it gave way to this one question on everyone's mind. What's going to happen to us now? It was this profound sense of being abandoned. Their leader, their Bapu, was gone, and the people felt completely and utterly orphaned.
The very next day, the day of the funeral, a really simple but powerful decision was made that would define this whole moment. Padmasi, Mrs. Naidu's daughter, she spoke for everyone when she just said, "We will walk." This was going to be the very last time they would ever walk with Bapu. And that walk, wow. The narrator describes it as agonizing. You had thousands of people just watching in total silence as Bapu lay on an open truck completely covered with flowers. People were openly weeping, desperately pushing forward, trying to get close enough just to touch his feet. The crowd was so thick, so dense with grief that moving was almost impossible. But see, walking with Bapu had always meant so much more than just, well, walking. It was at the very heart of his philosophy. It meant you had to slow down, you had to think with real clarity. It meant observing the world around you with this intense awareness, from the smallest insects on the ground to the vast horizon. It was a kind of active meditation. And this is why it was so incredibly powerful. For the average Indian, walking wasn't really a choice. It was often the only way to get from one place to another. Gandhi took this simple, everyday necessity and he transformed it. He turned walking into what he called a joyful effort, a powerful tool for progress that was available to every single person, no matter their status. Okay, so a few days after the funeral, the final part of this journey began. A special train was set up to take Gandhiji's ashes to Allahabad, where they would be immersed in the secret Ganges River. And it's here that we start to feel a shift. The mood begins to change from that raw grief to something much more reflective. So just to quickly recap where we are. We have the death on January 30th, immediately followed by the funeral procession. Then, days later, comes the special train journey, which leads to the immersion of the ashes in the Ganges, and finally, the return trip to Delhi. And what a contrast this is to that agonizing walk during the funeral. On this train, the compartment was filled with flowers, and people were singing bhajans, these beautiful devotional songs. The weeping had stopped. The narrator explains that they could actually feel his presence right there with them, in the flowers and in the songs. It was becoming a celebration of his spirit, not just a mourning of his death. But then, getting back to Delhi, the full weight of the loss came crashing back. And in a really personal way for the narrator, this quote, it's just so revealing. She talks about her life as if it existed inside a magic circle that Bapu had created. And with him gone, that protective circle just vanished, leaving her feeling completely vulnerable and unprotected. So where do you go from there? How do you move forward when you feel so unprotected and lost? Well, this final part is all about that internal struggle. and the incredible realization of where the true strength of Gandhi's legacy really lies. In a moment of absolute despair, this is the question the narrator asks herself. And it's a question that just cuts right to the heart of all that grief. I mean, if we lose our courage now that he's gone, did it all mean nothing? It's a moment of deep, profound doubt. But then, in her memory, she finds the answer. She remembers that before Bapu, millions of people were just ordinary folk, kind of living in indifference to each other. But he changed all of that. He brought them out of indifference and awakened them to one another's suffering. He didn't just lead them, he actually transformed who they were. And this was it. This was the big realization. The magic circle wasn't a person, it was an idea. Bapu was gone, yes, but his India, the India he dreamed of, was going to live on in his children. And by children, she means the very people he had awakened. The responsibility was now theirs. They were the ones who had to carry his banner forward. What a powerful lesson, right? A leader's true legacy isn't really found in their physical presence, but in the actions of every single person they inspire. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer.